Hello, everybody. Hope you are all doing well. Make sure that we are all working here. Sorry, it took a second. I forgot to turn on my mic. It's been known to happen. But anyway, welcome, one and all. Hopefully you are seeing the screen as I am. You should be seeing an image of Jay's amazing picture of Ethan Hawke, the Time skier, or Tempest blade. Let me know if you guys can hear and see everything okay. All right, there we go. Now it's catching up. Took a minute to catch up on my end. All right. Awesome. Okay, so welcome back to another reading stream. It's been a while since we did one of these. For those of you who don't know, I'm a writer. I've written several stories, some of which I've published, others I have not. And this story is one that I'm in the process of rewriting and fixing in a big way. This is Tempest Blade. I started writing this some time ago. I think it was a couple of years ago. And it is a sort of fantasy lone warrior sort of story. And I'm very proud of it. I've gotten a lot of very big... I've gotten a lot of praise for this one. And I am very excited to try to get this one published. This is a story that I want to get published. I was very much inspired by a lot of elements when making this story, and tonight I will be reading that to you. What we're going to do is I'm going to read you guys the prologue for this story, and then we're going to read chapters 1 through 4, and that'll be all we do for tonight. And if y'all enjoy it, maybe later on down the road we can read some more of it as I keep editing it. So before we get into it, just a couple things to remind you guys of. We do have rules for the reading stream. Rule number 1, we do not talk about For Honor or games or politics or anything like that. We just keep conversations focused on the stories or about writing or about the narrative, because otherwise it's just going to distract me, and I don't want to be distracted for this, so let's just keep things focused on the story. Second rule, please be respectful of me. I'm having to voice all this myself, and there are female characters, young characters, old characters, and doing all those different voices is difficult for me since I have a very deep voice. So bear with me as I try to do those voices. Don't make fun of me for how bad my voice acting is. Otherwise, I'll just have AI read all this, and then no one's happy. You know what I mean? And then third, be respectful to each other. Don't start arguing with each other in chat. We had that happen once before. Just none of that, okay? All right, so with all that out of the way, let's go ahead and get ready to read the prologue for Tempest Blade, because the prologue will set the stage for what is happening. And what I'm going to do is, as we go through the different chapters, I'm going to share with you art that Jay has done for those chapters, if he's done art for them, because Jay was a big fan of this series, and he drew a lot of different pieces of art for the different chapters. So I will show you guys what he drew. All right? All right. Here we go. Tempest Blade prologue, written January 11th, 2017. So this is almost 10 years old. The Tigerian Empire, ruled by Emperor Gregor Tiger III, is the middle of a national crisis. With the rise of industrialization, the empire's prosperity attracted the attention of their neighbors of the sea, the Yuanvat, who launched a full-scale invasion against the empire. In a desperate attempt to repel them, the empire was forced to increase the taxation of its citizens, including the Lothari, a race of forest-dwelling magic users who, while under the empire's rule and protection, chose to be non-activists in the war as well as non-conformists to industrialization and modernization. Against the wishes of the Lothari, Emperor Tiger built factories and human settlements within Lothari provinces and forests to help increase the production of weapons and supplies. For the sake of the empire, the Lothari allowed it, until the war ended. When the Yuanvat finally retreated, the Lothari demanded that the empire remove the settlements and factories from their land and return the taxes they were forced to pay. Unable to comply with these demands, several Lothari radicals launched attacks on these human settlements, slaughtering several dozens of innocent humans and laying waste to hundreds of gold's worth of factories and railways. Outraged in turn by this barbarism, the emperor demanded that the Lothari stand down or face war. And war it was to be. So would begin a year-and-a-half-long campaign known in the Lothari calendar as Vahan Ravaldran, the War of the Great Division. Though well versed in magical arts and masters in the way of the sword, the Lothari were not prepared for the machines of war the humans of the Empire brought to bear. Guns and cannons changed the shape of the battlefield in ways the Lothari simply could not fathom. Warriors and legends would be born on both sides, such as human swordsmen, so skilled and so deadly that when his blade was drawn, he became like a deadly tempest, cutting down any and all Lothari caught in his path. The Lothari called this man Tempest, which means the Tempest Blade. When the war finally ended, the true violence did not cease. Many Lothari, furious over their mistreatment and the losses they suffered to humanity, began to build several radical groups of guerrilla bands that attacked random humans within the Empire and doing all they could to stick it to the humans, oppressive or not. In turn, this led to human radicals who sought to harm any Lothari that came across them. And in a way, the war had never truly ended, and now the Empire was weakened and divided. As for the legend of the Tempest, it slowly went down as a legend in the hearts of both the Empire and the Lothari as well. And now, 3 years after the war has ended, on a moonlit night, the wind now calm after the war had settled, it's about to stir once more into a cyclone that will either bring hope to this broken land or further tear it apart. This story shall be told of a swordsman and his nature of the sword. Chapter 1. The sun was beginning to set. The sky was shifting from its bright blue to a red and purple hue. I beheld the clouds lazily running their fingers across the sky as the purple light shone bright upon their backs, as the horizon appeared like strokes of colored paint on a canvas. The trees of the forest seemed to spire to the sky like spears. They loomed overhead, casting long, dominant shadows onto the ground, and I couldn't stop myself from sensing their overwhelming presence. I was just another creature in this forest and at its mercy. With nothing but the blade at my side, I marched through the brush. The beasts and monsters that lurked within these forests were a threat to my hometown, and as its guardian, it was my duty to destroy them and keep it safe. This was the task for which my blade now found a purpose, though this was not its original purpose. "A sword is an instrument of death," my master would say. "It is not a toy, nor is it a tool. A sword neither recognizes good nor evil. Its only purpose and reason is to slay your enemy. It is because of this truth that you must understand what your purpose is so you can harness the sword. Why do you carry this weapon? What will you draw it for? Who will taste its steel? What kind of man do you wish to become? And when you can answer these questions, then you will know the true way of the sword. And thus the sword becomes more than a mere device of bloodshed, but a weapon of your own devices. It will become yours, and you will develop your way of the sword." In my youth, I did not understand his words. I did not comprehend their weight. He trained me in its use. He raised me to understand the sword like it were part of my very being. I spent years under his watchful eye, learning a mastery of the blade, but I still did not know what he meant. And I would not until the War of the Great Division. I, like all the others able-bodied men in my town, were recruited to fight for the Empire, and it was on the battlefield, amongst the roars of cannon fire and the smell of blood, that I understood the nature of a blade. I saw its capability, and I saw its beauty. It both amazed me and terrified me, and I vowed that when the war ended, I would return home. I would take what I'd learned, and I would use it to create my own understanding and way of the sword. Many were lost in the war. So much needless death, and so much of it brought by sword and gun and cannon. Even now the ringing of cannon fire in my ear will not leave my heart. It is a reminder of where I have been, what I have seen, and where I wish never to return to. I brushed the handle of my sword and sighed its texture and its feel. So beautiful a weapon and yet so lethal. It has carved my future and cut through my past. Am I grateful to it? Of course. But do I resent it sometimes? Perhaps. Suddenly, a cry split the stillness of the forest. I snapped my head up at the sound of a high-pitched wail. Spinning on my heel, my hand going to my sword, I looked to see the source of the scream. At first, there appeared to be no change in the forest until seconds later, I saw a tiny figure sprinting through the bushes and leaves for safety, screaming and eyes wide with terror. Barreling behind her was a massive bear, large and ragged. Its teeth dripped with drool as it roared furiously after the little figure. Its own roar mingled with the girl's cries, and it was closing on her fast. "Get down!" I shouted at the little girl. The child dropped, and I leapt over her, lunging towards the bear. It saw me, but did not slow down, picking up speed instead and lunging with a deafening bellow of rage and primal hunger. My hand moved to the hilt of my sword. I inhaled, and my mind cleared. "Do not draw your blade unless you're prepared to kill. The steel cannot leave the sheath unless you're ready to take a life. Remember, drawing a sword is not a gesture. It's a declaration of intent." Masterd's word echoed in my brain as they did every time I unsheathed the sword. It always made me hesitate, always made me pause, but not in this case. I acted on impulse and instinct. My body became like a ferocious breeze among the trees, my blade unsheathed with a speed to match lightning arcing across the horizon. I hardly felt myself move. This was swordsmanship, the art of the draw. In the same instant that I had moved, my sword was flying from my sheath with a hiss not unlike that of a striking serpent. And it was over before the bear ever met the ground. Over before my sword was even completely followed through. The bear struck the ground with a groan, a massive gash now running along its shoulder to its chest and into its gut. There was no vital point that I'd missed. My sword, only a moment ago still locked in its sheath, was now out and fully extended in the final follow-through of a one-handed blade strike. The blood upon my sword was fine and dripped gently off the straight edge. My eyes turned to see the carcass waiting. I calculated. Would it rise again? The beast lay still, blood running from its shoulder and chest. It was growling and groaning in agony. My slash, having gone through its flesh, did not cut deep enough to kill instantly. It was suffering, and that was not my intent. I approached it and held the still bloody blade over its head before driving it down into its skull. A bear head is thick and hard to punch through, but this sword was no ordinary sword, and with a strong enough thrust the bear's head was impaled. The bear gave a last moan of release, and then lay still again, without sound, without a twitch. When I was sure it wouldn't rise, I cleansed my blade and sheathed it, taking a moment to breathe and relax myself, but also to inspect and analyze the kill. The beast still stank of blood and meat. It had been eating recently. But why had it chased the child before? I returned to where the girl had fallen to check on her as well. Laying beneath me in nothing more than filthy rags, coated in clay, dirt, and what I feared to be fecal matter, I saw the girl. Her soft, dark hair was dirty with twigs and soil in it, tangling it up. But behind her hair, I saw two of the largest and most gorgeous eyes I'd ever seen. Deep blue like vast lakes. They were filled with both wonder and fear. She trembled as I approached and backed away slightly, scooching away on her behind. I paused a moment at her fear and tried to give an encouraging smile. "Hey, don't be afraid. It's all right. The bear won't hurt you." She stared at me confused like she didn't understand me. "I won't hurt you either." I took a tentative step forward, but she still seemed confused. And then as I looked at the girl more closely, I saw why. As she backed away, a few locks of her hair fell in front of her eyes and exposed her right ear. It was pointed and long, and her other one was most likely exactly like it. It was then I noticed that along with her pointed ears, she had sleek, slender limbs. Her eyes instantly darted to her head, and sure enough, I saw two small growths could be seen beginning to protrude from her forehead. The beginning of antlers. I inhaled fast through my nose as I beheld what she was. "You're a Lothari?" The Lothari were a race known for their magical ability and their love of the ancient rune stones that dotted the empire. They often built their villages around these runes, but the vast majority of their race kept to the southern provinces of Lapnda and Krakit. They were much like humans, but their language was vastly different from the Empire's because their language was the language used to harness the mystical properties of the rune stones. They learned the language of runes, and in doing so had learned how to access their incredible magic, a skill lost to most of humankind. However, during the War of the Great Divide, or the Vahendra Ivdran, as they called it, their knowledge of runes and magic was not enough in the face of the technological superiority of the Empire. The age of the gun had overpowered the ways of the ancient. Seeing one this far north was stunning and unheard of. How long had she been out here? Where had she come from? I hadn't seen a Lothari since the war, and those memories all began to trickle back into my mind like water. The guerrilla fighters attacking from the shadows, the sudden magical bursts of power that we were forced to endure, and then, of course, the battle on the bridge of Radran. It all felt so familiar and hauntingly close. The girl wasn't one of them. She was likely only a baby during those years of fighting. But I was taken aback by her presence. With an effort, I quickly tried to push aside my memories. I scrounged at what little of their language I could remember and tried to approach her again. Kir Ethrim, I said softly. The girl's eyes widened even more, if that were even possible, and she stopped retreating.
Ithrim?
She asked. It was the Lothari word for friend. In the Lothari language, words such as this are not just simple nouns. They're declarations. Yes, Ephraim. I held out my hand to her, and she quickly crawled closer, her eyes glazed into mine. She reached out and touched my hand with her small fingers. She looked no older than 4 or 5, maybe younger than that. She was cute, almost hard to look at. My name is... Oh, sorry. I caught myself speaking my own language again and quickly fixed it. Kir again, Ethan Hawk. I introduced myself. She placed her hand upon her tiny chest and spoke back in a voice like fallen snow.
Datgen Ifa,
she replied. I smiled. Chio Ifa, I chuckled. Her name was Aoife, a typical Lothari name. I reached into my bag and pulled out the last piece of bread I had, as well as a small cube of cheese. I held both out to her, and with a scream of excitement, she ran to them and took them, eating happily as if she hadn't seen food in ages. Hungry? She didn't answer. She just ate. I watched her a moment, questions forming in my mind about her. When she finished, she scrunched up her face and played with her lips as if struggling against them.
Ethan Whom with Ifa?
She asked. I suddenly realized she was trying to speak in my own language. She must have been around humans before. Either that or her parents had taught her well. Yes, lead, I instructed. Understanding that much, she ran past the bear and back to where she'd been running from. I followed close behind, surprised by this child, Aoife. How had she been able to survive on her own and learn some Imperial? I was fascinated by her. As we walked deeper through the woods, the light of the sun had begun to die completely, and the dancing of the fireflies was all that illuminated the path for me anymore. I kept losing sight of her raven dark hair, but her filthy little dress still managed to stand out in the darkness of the forest. The sound of night creatures filled my ears, and I started to wonder how deep she was going to lead me. It wasn't safe in the woods this late, and there was certainly more than bears in these forests. After a long hike through the woods, she stopped and pointed to a strange mass of wooden trees beyond, about 20 meters away. I squinted my eyes to see it better, and on closer inspection I realized I wasn't looking at trees, but what could only be described as a makeshift stick house built under a fallen one. It was haphazard and very poorly structured. A strong storm would decimate it. However, it also looked very recent, a week old at most. It was made up of various branches and limbs of trees compiled and stood in conjunction with each other to form a protective structure. The answer to how she lived out here now was clear, but there were still other things I didn't understand. For one thing, there was no way this child built this herself. Small as she was, there was no way she could move or arrange some of these branches and logs. Further, even if she had the strength to, odds of her knowing the basics of structural integrity like this was minimal. An adult did this, unquestionably. However, I saw no sign of an adult nearby. Not only this, but the sight of the house. It made me uneasy and slightly on edge. I placed my hand on my sword and put my other hand on her head. There was something wrong with this place, and I didn't like it. Stay back, I instructed. She looked at me, and though puzzled, my expression was all the translation she needed. I approached the stick house and caught the smell of death in my nose. It was not an unfamiliar odor, but it was definitely unwelcome. When I pushed back some of the dislodged wooden limbs, I saw why. I winced at the sight, but could not look away. A Lothari woman had been gored here. Her hair the same color as the girl's, but it was hard to tell anything else from the blood. I could see very small curled antlers on her head that grew back towards her head, and I could just make out a small tail extended below her torn and bloody clothing. But the rest of her body was hardly recognizable. From the stench, I had to guess she'd been dead a little while. 3 days, maybe 4. How long had Aoife been on her own? Was this why she was so quick to trust me? Because she had no one else to rely on out here for days on end? As I looked closer, it seemed the bear had been feeding on it. It was clear to me what happened here. The bear had found himself an easy meal out of this woman, and the girl had simply tried to run away. But there was far more to it than that. The body had been dead for some time, and the bear would have moved on by now if it had killed her. So it wasn't the bear that had killed this woman. But if it was not the bear that killed her, then what? Or who? I looked around with more diligence, and I got my answer. There was an arrow in the body. I stepped aside and picked up the arrow, looking it over. On the arrowhead was a tiny symbol, a symbol I didn't recognize or understand, but I knew what it was. A rune, I whispered. I didn't need to understand the meaning of this rune. An arrow with a rune on it could only mean it was crafted by a Lothari. They're the only ones who understand their meaning. As I glared at it, a strange understanding began to take me. I knew where this arrow came from. I had no way to prove it, but I know the hand that fired it, or rather I knew who they worked for. Slowly, bits and pieces of this girl's story started to fall together, and I didn't like it. It was best I didn't explain this to the girl. She wouldn't be able to handle what I'd learned about who had killed this woman, who I presumed to be her mother. I walked out, breaking the arrow in half and storing the end of the rune in my tunic so she wouldn't see it. Aoife had stayed behind the tree line where I'd left her, though she followed me with her eyes. I knelt down next to her, unsure what to say, and yet knowing in my heart what I needed to say.
Dyn Kier Amdiniad.
I wasn't sure if my wording had been correct. The word for home was hard to remember well, but it was what I wanted to convey. I wanted to take her home. She blinked a few times and looked me over as if sizing me up and judging me. Would you like to come with me? I asked again, forgetting to translate. It was so difficult speaking in her tongue.
Aoife, yes,
she answered, her little voice crying out.
Aoife, go with Ethan.
I was again taken aback by her immediate agreement. Are you sure? I asked.
No, lone, honig mal.
Her words translated easily. She was lonely and she was afraid. I couldn't blame her. I reached down and took her little hand in mine and began to lead her away from the side of the stick house. I would make a point to return at some point and give the woman inside a proper burial, but for now, Aoife needed to get home. She didn't belong out here any longer. Come on, Aoife, I whispered. Let's go home. Those words would be the start of something greater than I'd prepared for or dreamed would happen to me. The sword on my hip and the Lothari child at my side. It was a bizarre paradox. I, who had fought against her people in a war not 3 years ago, was now taking in a Lothari girl, and for what? A sense of duty? A way of repentance? No, this was what was right. This was what I would do regardless of my past, for it was what I had learned, what my master had taught me when I was a child and too young to understand. My sword's purpose was not to kill blindly and indiscriminately. I would use it to guard, to protect, to save. So now my blade and my heart would protect this child, regardless of what that might mean for my future. Chapter 2. The Tigerian Empire was divided into 9 provinces, each governed by a governor and his associates. The town I grew up in, Nearden, was a simple hunting village in the province of Ventarayath. Its a location near the deep woods made it ideal for hunting, camping, and exploring. But it was also dangerous, which was why my job was to defend Nearden from the monsters and beasts lurking within. I'd found bizarre and frightening creatures within the woods by my town. Giant spiders the size of bears, a chimera-like beast that I'd never seen before, and the occasional great wolf. But never before had I come across something like this. I glanced down at the child Aoife, the young Lothari girl, clutching my hand with her tiny fingers and following me out of the forest clearing as the dark night was finally setting over us. Her black hair would have made the evening itself jealous, and the moon bathed us in a luminous light that shone the way back to the gates leading to Nearden. As we approached, the 2 guards out front raised their spears in my direction, but I kept walking. Suddenly, I felt the resistance of Aoife, who pulled back and hid behind my legs. I stopped and glanced down at her. It's all right. They won't hurt you. She didn't respond, but only trembled, her little legs quaking. I looked back up at the guards. Lower your weapons! It's me! Oh! Hawk! Sorry, it's hard to see you in the dark, one of them called, lowering his spear. Long day. Something like that, Leon, I replied. Mind letting me by? Hold on. What's that behind you? The other one asked. I gave a slight glance back at Aoife, and she shrank back further behind me as though I might hide her more completely. A child, I answered carefully. She was lost in the woods, and I'm going to find her a place to stay for the night, I answered. I reached behind me and brushed Aoife's hair over her ears. For the time being, it was best they didn't know she was Lithari. What's she doing in the woods this late? Leon asked, a look of perplexed amazement on his face as he looked at her. I did my best to act as a sort of shield, making sure he didn't see her ears. I don't know, I answered with a shrug, but I know she didn't belong out there, correct? Yeah, head on in, Leon agreed, showing his hand to the gate in a welcoming gesture. I nodded and walked past. I turned to acknowledge the other guard, but he was one I didn't recognize, although based on the glare he was giving me, he wasn't going to be as friendly with me as Leon. I led Aoife in past the guard's eyes and down the street, choosing not to think further on it.
Ethan?
She whispered. I looked down at her quickly, surprised by her sudden squeak.
Fight off na small.
My Lithari was rusty, but I knew that word meant afraid. Don't be afraid. It's all right. I pat her shoulder tendernly. It's all right.
Rit?
She asked. I smiled, realizing she was trying to repeat my word. All right. Say it together.
All rit. All rit. All right?
She asked. That's better. Good job, I muttered. I looked around, embarrassed at the way I'd been speaking to her, but soon relaxed as I noticed so few people out about this late at night. Best thing to do would be to just head to the inn and get something to eat for myself and Aoife. I've been so caught up in her that I hadn't even realized how hungry I was. I heard my stomach growl and grumbled. I'm starving.
Starving?
Starving. It means hungry, I tried to explain. She didn't answer. What's the word? Sulnik. Her eyes lit up in understanding.
Hungry. Hunger.
Yes, I answered. It was amazing how fast she was learning the language. How much had she been exposed to before now? Just who was this kid? We finally came up to a large building that stood 3 stories tall. It took up almost half the block and had lights on the bottom windows and behind the doors. Above the front door was a large sign reading Traveler's Den. It was an inn and bar of sorts, meant for the weary traveler or hunter. I pat Aoife on the shoulder, and she looked up at me curiously with those same wide eyes. This is where you'll stay for a while. It's not much, but I know the owner of this place. You don't understand half of what I'm saying, I asked, suddenly remembering her limited language skills. I didn't have the fluency to translate it all, so I tried explaining slowly. You will be safe here, I promise. Somehow she understood that as she smiled and nodded reassuringly and allowed me to lead her to the door. Now, let's get you... Suddenly there was a loud scream. Ah! Help! The screams were deafening, and the sound of a crash alerted me to thrown bottles and the shattering of glass. My hand flew to my sword, and Aoife screamed and hid behind me, terrified. I burst through the door, ready to strike. What's going on? In the middle of the inn were 2 tall men, one with a mullet and the other a shaved head and a beard. Both wore basic hide armor pieces and had a pistol and small sword strapped to their side. Mercenaries or bandits, most likely. However, instead of holding up the joint or threatening, both were on their knees, blood pooling from fresh wounds caused likely by shattered beer glasses that had been smashed on their heads. And in front of them was a young woman gripping one by the collar of his tunic and glaring daggers at them as she were the devil himself, holding a kitchen knife in her free hand, pointing its tip at the single thug she wasn't holding by the neck. She was well built, but not masculine. She had wavy chestnut hair worn in a low, messy ponytail over her shoulder. She had brown eyes with 3 claw-marked scars over her right eye that she'd gotten long ago during a scuffle. When she saw me enter, her vicious snarl suddenly turned to an excited smirk.
Oh, Ethan, welcome home. How was your trip?
Rox, what's going on? I asked. She never lost her smile as she shook the two men beneath her.
Oh, just a business transaction. These 2 gentlemen were trying to skip out on paying their bill for their room and board, so now they need to pay up.
She's a monster! She's a bloody monster! The one with the beard screamed, less friendly.
Yes, and you owe this monster some money, she replied. Ethan, why don't you take a seat at the corner table and I'll be right with you? She proceeded to drag the 2 men out the back door of the inn, and all I heard were pleas for mercy.
I knew Rox. She wouldn't kill them. Roxanne had ways of making people wish they were dead, though. Roxanne was the daughter of the innkeeper Gaius.
She had been a friend of mine since before the war. Her father had known mine as well before his death, and of course, I knew Gaius during the war. It was how I had arranged this living situation in this inn. When I returned from the war, I had no home, as my old house had been sold. Roxanne and Gaius gave me a room to stay in for as long as I would need, free of charge, so long as I helped keep their establishment safe from the occasional bandit group or thieving group that came knocking. As for her reputation with the locals, Roxanne may not have been a soldier, but there was no man in all of Nearden who would dare try and skip out on paying a bill at this inn. Not while she was around. I looked at Aoife, who was still staring dumbstruck at where that event had transpired, and I gently touched her hand. It's all right, Aoife. All right. Yes, all right, she repeated. I felt a strange sense of pride hearing her use the word I'd taught her just a while ago. I led her to the corner table, and we both sat down, and I made sure to keep her hair brushed over her ears to keep them hidden. Once we were situated, I could take the time to appreciate the inn. It was called the Traveler's Den for a reason. Once upon a time, it was called the Gold Dragon Inn. Anyone who asked about the name would hear Gaius go on for hours about an adventure he'd had in his youth, where he rode the back of a golden dragon in the Dwarven Mountains, and it had dropped him off at this very spot. So he swore it be the home of his new business, and thus he wanted to name this inn after that dragon who brought him here. Rox and I both knew this was ridiculous, and eventually convinced him for a much more simple name. For one thing, I knew Gaius had bought this property when he was young, back when he was called the Blue Heron Inn, and for another thing, I knew for a fact Gaius had a crippling fear of heights. If a dragon had lifted his body off the ground, it was not by his choice, and almost certainly would have been faint. But I owed that old badger, so I let him tell his tall tales, while I just smirked in the background, of course. Names and origins aside, it was a very nice establishment all the same. A large dining area with at least 10 or 12 tables set for the weary or hungry wanderer who came to eat or rest. A bar stood along the wall near the entryway with stools all around it, and behind the bar was where a barmaid, usually Rox, would work. The kitchen lay behind that bar where Gaius would perfect his cooking craft, and for all his tall tales and self-aggrandizing stories, the tales about his cooking skills were all very true. He was a very accomplished cook. The whole room felt warm as a roaring fire snapped and burned in the fireplace across the way. The chandelier above hung, made of deer antlers with 10 candles burning away, hanging over our heads and lighting the stairs that led upstairs to the living rooms. The inn had 2 floors above the dining area, all leading to hallways with doors that opened to show small bedrooms for people to stay in. The inn was too large for just Rox and Gaius to run, and indeed they had a few employees they hired to help, but I saw them so rarely I likely wouldn't have recognized them unless Rox and Gaius gave them orders or directions. Plus, Gaius didn't like folks using his kitchen without him present. This inn had come to be a rather pleasant home to stay in, and so, despite its odd origins and the eccentricness of the owner, I loved it here. After waiting a while, Roxanne returned, dusting her hands off, and there was no blood on her outfit this time, which was reassuring. "Hey, Ethan," she laughed, walking over to the table and leaning over, smiling a genuine welcoming grin. Her hands rested on the wooden table and her eyes twinkled. "You've been on patrol for the last 3 days. I was starting to wonder if you'd gotten hurt." "No, just hunting a griffin deep in the woods," I answered. In the past, such a declaration might have enticed Rox to ask for more information, but she was much more used to such adventures by now. "There's just no shortage of—" She suddenly stopped talking as her eyes fell on Aoife. "Ethan, who is this?" Aoife stiffened and tried to jump off of her chair and hide again. She was truly fearful of Roxanne, though whether it was from the performance earlier that Roxanne put on or just her timid nature, I wasn't sure. "Her name's Aoife. I found her all alone in the woods, and she needs a home." Rox's expression turned hard and her smile turned into a frown. "Ethan, this isn't an orphanage. We can't keep her here without some kind of compensation." "I'll pay for any living expenses." "Ethan, she'll stay with me in my room. I'll pay for her meals and everything, but I can't just toss her out on the street." "Well, I'm not saying you should, but couldn't you hand her over to the authorities and they could do something about her? Why do you have to take responsibility?" I hesitated a moment and looked around. There weren't a lot of patrons tonight. An old man sitting at a table in the distance, half drunk and not paying attention. A small family near the bar paying for rooms with one of the employees I didn't recognize. Other than them, I saw no one around looking. So I leaned forward and slightly pulled back strands of Aoife's hair to reveal her pointed ears. The sight made Roxanne squeak and take a sudden step back. She's Lithari? Keep your voice down," I hissed. Roxanne let out a long exhale again, rubbing her brow. She looked exasperated, but I wasn't about to waver on this. Ethan, Okay, you can't do this to us. You cannot do this. It's not illegal to take in or tend to a Lothari, I pointed out. But it sure isn't popular. Ethan, do you know what the local reprobates will do if they find out there's a Lothari living in this inn? Isn't that why you keep me around? I asked. Roxanne didn't laugh. Ethan, she should be with her people. I mean, surely she has a mother and father who... I stood up fast and leaned close enough so Aoife couldn't hear what I said to Rox. Her mother was killed by the Serendinen. Roxanne stopped speaking instantly, and her eyes fell on Aoife, who was gazing between the two of us, confused, unsure what to do, and not having heard what I'd just whispered. The Serendinen. You're sure? She asked. I nodded slowly and shot a fast glance at Aoife and a quiet don't say another word about it in front of her command. Rox got the message and didn't open her mouth again. There was an arrow in her mother with a rune on its head. I should know what they look like. I saw enough of them back during the war. After the war ended, the Lothari ideally would have returned to their passive and secluded ways. But unfortunately, many felt that the war was not yet over for them. The radical Lothari who continued to fight and launch guerrilla attacks on humans were known as the Serendinen. They were ferocious, deadly, they took no prisoners, and worse yet, they were just as brutal to their own kind as they were to humans. They massacred the Lothari leaders and chiefs who gave in and surrendered during the war. They slaughtered any who sympathized with the Empire. They were as feared by their own kind as they were by humans. Whatever her parents had done, it was enough to warrant resentment by the Serendinen. They believed Aoife to be dead. If I returned her to her own people, they would kill her again. You can't hide her for years forever, Ethan. People are going to find out what she is. Tell them she's staying with me. That'll keep them out of the way. Not all of them. And it sure won't help your popularity around here. Rox, I've told you before, I don't care what they think of me. Now, could Aoife and I have some food already? Roxanne sighed and shook her head. You are hopeless. Hopeless! And yet I'm still here. So you are. I don't know why, but you are still here. I'll be back with your favorite, and I'll get something for her. She stood and walked away, allowing Aoife to climb back into her seat. I looked at Aoife for a while and thought about the reality of the situation. Roxanne was right to be concerned, but this was the right thing to do. I couldn't leave her. I couldn't just let her die. Was the life of this one child worth all the trouble? Well, I'd have to find out. Here you two go, Roxanne returned, carrying 2 plates. One was loaded with rice and meat, and the other was a meal of small portions, meat and vegetables for Aoife. I wasted no time digging in, and to my surprise, Aoife followed suit. She dug into the food hungrily, tears rolling down her face as she scarfed down every morsel. I had to stop a moment and place a hand on her mouth so that she'd swallow. Roxanne watched too, still shaking her head. Ethan, you do know you're not her father or big brother, right? I'm aware. Is this about what you did during the war? Is this about making amends or something? Why do I need a reason to do the right thing? I asked, giving her a warning glare. It was a rule between Roxanne and me. We don't talk about what happened during the war. There were some things she simply didn't need to know and that I didn't want to be reminded of. But you don't know anything about taking care of children, Roxanne argued, and you can't possibly take her with you when you go back out into the woods on patrol. I sighed and set my fork down a moment. Yeah, I'll think on that. I've got a few days before I need to go back out. Roxanne stood up and her frown gently slid into a smile. It is good to have you back, Ethan, circumstances aside, she muttered before walking back to the bar. I glanced at Aoife and then at her food. She'd eaten all of it, so quickly it was frightening. Full? I asked. She didn't answer me, and I figured she was still nervous. I finished my own meal and stood leading her up the stairs to the 3rd floor. A few folks stared at us, whether it was that they noticed her ears or they were shocked to see me with a child, I couldn't tell, but I tried hard to ignore their stares. I opened the door to my modest little home, and she wandered in slowly and cautiously, as if she wasn't sure she was welcome. My bed is yours if you want it, I offered. She glanced back at me questioningly, and I motioned towards the bed. She nodded, and she clambered into it. I pulled the sheets over her and went to go sit on the chair across the room to sit and relax. She looked at me from the bed, and I raised an eyebrow. What's wrong? I asked. Lawin, she whispered, her eyes brimming with tears and quivering lip appearing on her face. I grinned. Lawin. I knew that word at least. Good.
I'm glad you're happy, I muttered. Now get some sleep. I'll talk to you tomorrow. I didn't even need to give the suggestion. She was already asleep before I could finish. Chapter 3. I stirred from sleep, shaking my head slightly. I rubbed the grogginess from my eyes and rolled my neck, working out the cracks and the pops of my muscles. I realized I was still sitting on my chair by the corner of the room. Why wasn't I in bed? I glanced at my lap to see a book still there. I'd been reading it last night because I'd wanted to stay up and keep an eye on Aoife. My memory felt like it restarted, and I remembered everything about yesterday evening. I stood up and stretched, groaning a little as I did. After getting the stiffness out, I walked to the bed to check on Aoife. As I approached, something was off to me. I smelled something foul, something that didn't belong. Aoife? Aoife, are you all right? I placed my hand on the sheets which covered her body and suddenly retracted my hand, feeling a cold, damp patch under it. I sniffed my hand and cringed. Urine. Did you wet the bed? There was no reply. Was she still sleeping? I growled and ripped off the sheets to see her. Wake up, Aoife! She lay on a sweaty, stained mattress. Her hair was wet with sweat and her forehead red. Her mouth hung open slightly, breathing heavily through her nose and mouth. Her eyes were shut, but not from sleep. She was in pain. I leaned forward and placed a hand on her forehead quickly, and after a moment I pulled it away. Her head was burning with fever. She opened her eyes wearily and looked up at me as if she were straining to see me.
Ethan? Kieran Salmon?
Of course you feel sick. You're running a fever, I grumbled. The bedwetting issue could wait. I needed a doctor to see her. I grabbed a blanket from the cabinet and threw it over her body to keep her warm. Wait here, I'll be right back. I ran out the door quickly, locking the door behind me so no one could come in and stumble across her. I hurried down the stairs back to the main bar area where Roxanne was already up and about, cleaning glasses and dishes behind the counter. Standing behind her was an older man with white hair and a wrinkled complexion. Though he was old, he carried a strong presence with him. I knew this man well. I respected him. He'd saved my life twice, and I owed him everything. And I was going to owe him again after this.
Ethan, Roxanne smiled. Good morning. What's wrong?
She asked, noticing the concern on my face. Gaius, I need your help, I said to the old man. Gaius turned around and looked back at me curiously. It never ceased to amaze me when I could see that long scar under his right jaw that ran up to the bridge of his nose. He'd gotten that in the Battle of Paidola, when he'd taken a clash from a Lothari cavalry soldier. He was a medical officer in the army at the time, but it was that slash that forced him to retire. And it was our mutual understanding of war that led to our friendship. But would he help me now? When he learned what he'd been treating? Please, Gaius, come with me. Gaius' reaction to Aoife wasn't much different from Roxanne's. He stared for a moment at the Lothari child, mouthed a few silent curses, and crossed his arms in frustration. A Lothari child. You brought a Lothari child into our inn. Ethan, of all the reckless things you've done. She's sick, Gaius. Oh, I can see that all too clearly, he growled. Realize what you've done could get every one of us in deep trouble? Yeah, Rock said the same thing last night. Then you should have listened. I know why you did it, but why do you have to involve us? You know what will happen if she's found. I have a rough idea, but I'll worry about that after she recovers. Now, please, you were a doctor, Gaius. Will you help her? He glared at me a moment and then back at her. He snorted in disdain and then approached. She looked up at him and instantly tried to escape, only to fall back in a fit of coughing. Gaius knelt down beside her and put a hand over her head to feel it. Ava began to tremble and cough. Calm her down, he ordered. I came closer, not sure what I could do to make her relax. And then I had a thought. Aoife, it's all right. She paused and looked at me. All right, remember?
All right,
she said, having remembered the word. Relax. Can you say that word too? Relax.
Relax.
She picked up on our language quick. She part of a human settlement at one point? Gaius asked as he moved from her forehead to her neck to examine her pulse. I don't know. I'm going to find out, I answered. Gaius nodded and he pulled open her mouth. Say ah, he ordered. I looked at Aoife and nodded encouragingly. She tried to comply, but then broke down into another coughing fit, her head falling back on the sweaty pillow. Rubbing his own brow, Guy stood back up and walked away from the bed. I approached him. Well, at a glance, it's an infection of some sort. Probably got it from eating diseased animals or lack of proper nutrition while she was in the woods. Whoever was taking care of that girl did a piss poor job. She was living alone in the woods. Her mother was murdered. It's a miracle she's alive at all. She won't be much longer if she doesn't get some antibiotics, Guys replied. And I don't have any here to help her. You need to run to town to pick it up. I took what he said in, and I could taste the bitterness in his words. Your scar stinging you right now? I asked gruffly. Don't give me that look, Ethan. As a doctor, I can't simply ignore someone who's sick. But I'm not going to lie to you either. I'm not exactly thrilled to be taking care of a Lothari after what they did to me. Did to so many of my friends and yours as well. Aoife was not on those battlefields. I snapped, grabbing at my sword and throwing my cloak on. And where are you going? Into town. I'm getting her medicine. And Gaius? Thank you. Don't go getting mushy on me, lad. Now hurry and get her that medicine. I'll keep her breathing while you're gone. The marketplace was modest. I'd seen larger when I was stationed around different parts of the Empire. But seeing larger markets and towns only made me miss and respect the quaint quality of this one. Shops lined the street, and there were stands selling fruits and vegetables as well as jewelry and trinkets. But these weren't the things I needed. I marched through the bustling crowd, across the aisles of stores and shops, until I finally saw small buildings made of antique-like brick and mortar. I pushed open the wooden door and approached the counter where a young woman stood behind the counter. She had dark skin, long black hair with brown eyes. Her name was Melody, and her profession was in alchemy and potion preparation. A dangerous business to have in these rapidly evolving times. While there was nothing truly magical about the creation of potions or concoctions, the concept was far too akin to magic in nature for many locals to understand or respect, and for this reason she always kept a gun just beneath the cabinet. When she saw me coming in, she sighed and straightened up, as her right hand had gone for that gun almost by instinct.
Hawk, thank goodness. I thought you were that asshole Brandon.
I wish I had more time to talk, Melody. I've got a sick kid staying at the inn who needs antibiotics. I hope you've got some.
Don't I always? But a kid. Ethan Hawk, you sly dog. So who's the mom? Come on, you can tell me.
It's not like that, Melody. I hated when she got like this.
It's not a servit, is it? I knew you had that stay in one of their villages a few weeks past. Oh, was it that one client from way back?
Stop it. She's not mine. I'm taking care of her for now.
Oh, so you picked her up from somewhere. Well, let it never be said that Ethan Hawk is heartless.
She winked. She walked to a counter behind her and began searching through bottles and capsules.
What are the symptoms?
Fever, weakness, harsh cough, irritability, I think.
And I guess you had Gaius look her over first.
Who else would send me here?
Did he give a diagnosis?
No, just that it was an infection.
Typical. That old badger wouldn't know jungle rot from Yellian fever.
I don't know the difference either. Do you know how to help her or not?
Well, don't be so impatient, Ethan. What do you think brought it on? I need to know her disease before I can give her anything.
I started to tell her the truth. Tell her that she was Lothari, but how would she take it? Would she respond like Gaius and Rox did? Would she be compassionate? Would she help? I wanted to keep it secret, but maybe there was something about being Lothari that mattered in her treatment. I had to tell her. There was every chance her disease was related to her kind. Melody, she's Lothari. I found her in the forest alone and dirty. Her mother was dead.
She's what? Ethan, oh my God, you can't say that here.
It's the truth.
I'm not saying it isn't, but you can't say that here. You need to keep quiet.
She hissed. Now I was confused. I raised an eyebrow and frowned. Melody?
Look, if she's been on her own in the woods for a long time, then it's likely a case of jungle rot, or maybe something she picked up from an infection of an open wound. I'll give you something for that, but don't talk about Lothari right now.
She stopped talking as the door opened and 3 men walked in. All were dirty, rather ugly, and 2 had thick beards and toothy grins. One had on a metal helmet that resembled a bucket more than a helm. I turned to see them, but they looked back at Melody, ignoring me, who was once again leaning towards the gun under her cabinet.
Oi, Melody, I thought we told you to close up for the day,
the man in the helmet shouted.
I have to make a living, Brandon, she snapped back. Now all of you get out unless you're here to buy something.
Is that right? Brandon asked, walking towards the counter threateningly. You making a living practicing magic like those goddamn vermin? You want to put some points on those ears and swing from a treetop like those bloody monkeys?
It's not magic. It's simple chemicals, medicine crafting, and potion making. There is nothing magical about it.
Brandon just snorted and slammed his hand on the table.
It ain't natural, you little whore. Now be a good little girl and close your damn magic shop before I shut you down for good.
He reached into his back holster and removed a long-barreled pistol, and I instantly felt my blood boil at the sight, and my own hand went to my sword. That's enough, I hissed. The lady asked you to leave. I suggest you do so. Brandon turned to look at me at last, and his eyes narrowed, and then his eyes fell on the sword.
You carry a sword? What do you think you are, boy? A swordsman from the Silver Corps? Wait, Brandon, that's him, one of his henchmen cried. That black sword, it's gotta be. He's Ethan Hawke.
At this, Brandon's eyes widened and his sneer twisted into a snarl. I didn't falter.
Hawke? You're Hawke? I thought it smelt worse here than last time, and now I know why. Stinks of traitors.
That word, for all its meaning and bitterness, left me unfazed. I didn't even blink at it. I've been called traitor by so many that I'd grown cold to the word and its purpose. I simply brushed it aside like a breeze. Put away the gun, I muttered.
Why? Afraid of it? These are what won us the war, you backstabber.
There is no war here. Put away the gun now.
Or what? You gonna make me?
Would you like me to? I pushed my sword out slightly from its sheath with a click, and the sound of its movement sent Brandon scrambling backwards. He didn't lose his sneer, but he also knew better than to stand in front of me the way he did. He motioned to his friends, and they made their way to the door.
We ain't done here. Not by a long shot. You can't escape forever, traitor. You betray us all, your people. You betray us, you traitor!
And with that, they stormed out, slamming the wooden door so hard that the dust on the ceiling came loose and drifted down. Melly leaned against the counter and groaned.
Those animals. They wouldn't understand if I spelled it out for them. And as for you, I'm sorry, Ethan, for what they called you.
Let them call me what they want. It's their right.
But you're not a traitor. You didn't.
They wouldn't understand it, even if I spelled it out for them. I repeated her words back to Melody with a calm smile. It's not worth getting angry over.
You're a good man, Ethan. No matter what they say. Though, I'll probably be closed tomorrow just to be safe, she replied. Then she reached across the counter and handed me a blue bottle of something. Give this to the girl. 2 spoonfuls by mouth every 5 hours. She'll be fine in a few days.
I took the bottle and sighed. Thank you, Melody. And I'm glad you don't mind helping her.
Lithari, human, servid, beast. Kindness doesn't discriminate,
she said with a gentle grin.
It's like you said, there's no war here. She's no more my enemy than you are, and I do hope she gets better soon.
So do I. I'll be back to visit.
You better,
she called out as I walked out into the street. As I did, I was met by a small crowd with Brandon at the front of it. All looked angry and agitated at the sight of me.
There he is, the traitor, Ethan Hawke of the Silver Corps. Get out of here, you! Screw you, you traitor! You turncoat! Coward! Nothing but coward!
I ignored them, and I walked on. They all shouted after me, and a few even followed. I didn't care what they had to say. I was still thinking of Aoife and how she was doing. I hoped this medicine helped her. I'd been gone long enough as it was.
You're a coward and you're scum, traitorous Hawke! Brandon roared after me. You're lower than scum!
I didn't even slow down. I kept hurrying down the road towards the inn. I needed to leave the market and get home to Aoife, Gaius, and Rox. I then thought about all the words Aoife already knew in English. How would she feel about what the townsfolk called me? In Lithari, traitor is Dearnma, though as an insult it's just Dearn. Did Aoife know that word? Did it matter to her? It hardly mattered to me, but was that what she was? Her mother was killed by the Serendinen. Was she a Dearnma to her people? Was Aoife a Dearnma? Maybe that's why I felt such a bond with her. We were both alone, both seeking comfort and a longing to forget, a longing to belong, a world where that word would no longer sting. I was no traitor, so the word had little impact on me, but to her, I wonder what it meant. I pondered all this as I fled the crowd of jeering patriots of the Empire and returned to a home where the word traitor had no power. I do not have an image for the next chapter. Actually, wait, no, I do actually. I forgot. I was looking through my pictures just now and I do have one. Hold on. If you'll give me just a second, I'll put it up. I forgot about it. I'll adjust it a little bit. There we go. That is the picture for this chapter, and I will hide that one. There we go. All right. Back to it. Let's read. This is chapter 4, and it's the last one we'll read for tonight. She was sleeping now, silently. Breath escaped her lips as soft as silk or skin. Her face was still a bit pale, but at least she was able to rest. I ran a hand over her forehead to feel for fever. It was down now, much better than before. As I felt her head, long raven black strands fell over my fingers, and I retracted my hand quickly, startled by it. Still, she slept, and I watched her. I barely left her side except to eat and drink, and even then I'd always return to the room with something for her. Soup, usually. She didn't eat much. In fact, she barely sipped it, but with each meal I gave Aoife the antibiotics. She hated the taste, called it agstra, a word roughly meaning disgusting. Well, I assume that's what she was saying. She could have just been trying to spit it out. It had been 2 days since my trip into town. Gaius hadn't spoken a word to me in all that time, just glared at me occasionally, and then would go about his business. I knew we'd have to have a talk about this soon. I was prepared for it, but it would be when he initiated. I wasn't in the mood to approach him. Not now. Fortunately, Gaius seemed intent on meeting me this evening. I heard a knock at the door, and I turned to face it. Yes? The door opened, and in walked Gaius, looking from me and then to Aoife. The scar on his face twisted as his face stiffened from a frown. I turned back to Aoife.
She doing better?
Gradually. Thank you, Gaius.
Don't thank me yet, brat,
he growled, taking a seat in my chair, while I remained on the bed with Aoife. He reached for his pipe as he spoke.
We still need to discuss what we're gonna do about her.
She'll stay with me until I can get her a new home where she'll be safe. I told you that last time we talked.
And it's still foolish,
Gaius snapped back.
She's Lothari. There are few human families willing to take that girl in, and if what you say is true, and her family was killed by the Serendinen, then she's a traitor to her own people as well.
Then what do you suggest, Gaius? He tensed up, feeling the edge. What are you proposing I do?
Kid, I wasn't saying you should throw her out, but what can you expect us to do? If those rabble-rousing bastards find out we have a Lothari staying here, they'll burn my home to the ground.
I won't let them do that. Gaius groaned and leaned forward, resting his head in his hands.
Ethan, you're not her father. You can't just raise her as your own. She's Lothari. She's a child. You're in over her head, Hawk. You need to... I know that!
I shouted, causing Gaius to fall silent almost instantly.
I know!
But there's no other choice.
Ethan, Gaius muttered, you're a good lad. Always were. You saved my life in the war, and I'll never be able to repay you for that, but I'm sorry. I can't risk my home and the life of my daughter because of this.
I understand. Gaius said nothing but just stared at me. Fine. We'll leave and find a new home. I won't put you or Rox in danger. I leaned forward and rubbed her head again, feeling her fever, despite it being no different than last time.
You really are dead serious about taking care of her, aren't you?
I'm not a killer, Gaius. Be it on my sword or not, I won't let this child die. As a doctor, I would think you could understand that. Just give me till tomorrow, then we'll leave. Gaius sat in the chair a long moment and stared at us. I didn't pay him any attention as I continued to keep watch of her.
Oh, for heaven's sake, he grumbled, biting his pipe with enough force to chip the wood. I ain't got no choice. Fine, keep the girl. We'll put her to work or something in the kitchens, and maybe find a way to hide her blasted ears in those antlers. Could put her in a bonnet or something.
I turned to face him, and he had a disgruntled frown, though his expression was lighter than I would have expected. You sure?
I still say it's risky, but damn it, I can't just throw you out in the cold. I owe you my life, so I'd be a real cursed bastard to abandon you now. Besides, if you leave town, who'll protect our borders from those beasts in the forest? You got a job to do, he answered. Fine, you win. She can stay, for now.
Thank you, Gaius.
You're lucky I'm soft, he chuckled.
He stood up and made his way to the door, rubbing his head tiredly.
I'll see if I can't whip up some supper for you tonight.
I'm fine, thanks, I called back. Gaius paused and stared at me a long moment, a concerned look on his tired old face.
Ethan, I'm sure I don't have to tell you this, but raising that girl, it won't make up for what happened.
I know that, Gaius.
It wasn't your fault. None of it.
I just nodded sadly and looked on.
You had no choice.
I always have a choice, Gaius. If I make the correct one. So I'm making the correct one now.
I suppose you are.
Gaius sighed before walking out and closing the door, leaving me with Aoife, and silently remembering. Remembering those days only a few years ago, and yet feeling not so long at all. The days where the smell of gunpowder suffocated the lungs and the roar of cannon fire overwhelmed the ears. The crackling of fires in the trees and the thundering of hooves of horses sprinting through the battlegrounds. That was the war I remembered, and the war I always returned to when I thought back. But that war always started with the Silver Corps. I remembered it so eerily clear that day. The sun had been high in the sky and the clouds drifted lazily without care or fear. I remembered being recruited not for any ordinary division. I was to be inducted into the Silver Corps, the elite warriors of the Tigerian Empire. Each member was a trained and experienced fighter in some way, shape, or form, and they were only sent on the most difficult missions. Sometimes a handful would be given to a company of soldiers to lead them through particularly difficult campaigns. But whatever the case, the Silver Corps went, there was sure to be a grand conflict. By that point, I had not earned much reputation amongst the soldiers. All they knew was I was a no-name swordsman from a no-name town near a forest with more respite than the capital of our province. The other Silver Corps members then barely noticed me, but they would learn my name before long. They all would, not because I desired attention, but because my blade would bathe in blood before the war was over, and fame is bought in blood. There were other swordsmen there, some of them I'd heard of. One I recognized because of his sword alone. It was a massive blade, larger than my own body, wielded by a man built like an oak tree. He had no shirt on, and his blade, shaped like a massive meat cleaver, was strapped to his back by a massive leather belt. The bloodlust in his eyes was unmistakable. This was Krat, the Cleaver. Supposedly he killed 5 soldiers in a single swing of his blade in the last war. And standing not far off from him was a smaller man with a long, thin sword. He had his hair pulled back in a ponytail and a single scar just below his right ear running to the corner of his mouth. I knew he was Halen, the Swallow, a swordsman of the royal court who was infamous for his fencing capabilities. There were others too, more than I could name and some I'd never heard of before, but was sure that they had reputations. I gripped the hilt of my own sword and remembered myself and why I was here. I had not come to test my strength against these people. I had come to execute in the name of the Empire. I came to defend my home as I had sworn to do. I was drafted so no one else in my town would have to be. I would stand among giants. I would raise my sword with them for the sake of my townsfolk. At long last, a tall man walked out. Despite his height, he was a portly fellow with a thick beard and a helmet. His armor was flashy and elegant like a high-ranking general. He stood before us and gave a loud cough, calling us all to attention.
My name is General Mondar. You are the finest warriors the Empire has to offer.
which is why you have all been called together for the sake of its defense. I listened to his little speech, but my thoughts kept returning back home. How ironic that then I couldn't stop thinking of home, and now I couldn't stop thinking of the battlefields. He prattled on for a few minutes about the pride of the Empire and the necessity of victory. No one seemed that interested. It felt as if they all just wanted to get this talk over with like I did. And at last he got to the part I was waiting for. Tomorrow you shall all be deployed. Return to your quarters and rest, for tomorrow you shall be given your commissions and your orders. Do not fail. The glory and hope of the Empire is upon your shoulders. And so we did. We all marched back to the barracks where we would rest, laugh, drink, or eat. But all I wanted to do was go home. I couldn't, though. So I settled for sleep. And the next morning I would be whisked away to the war, and my life would change forever. I awoke to the sound of a cough, and when I opened my eyes, I expected to see myself in the barracks again, awakening to the sight of an officer or another corps warrior over my head. But instead I saw the large, curious eyes of a little girl looking back at me. I was no longer on the battlefields. I was back home. I was with Aoife in my room. I must have fallen asleep while thinking. Aoife looked down at me in concern and in questioning. I sat up and rubbed my tired face and ignored my rumbling stomach.
Ethan?
She asked. I'm all right, Aoife, I informed her.
All right,
she said with a smile. It was becoming her favorite word, it seemed. How are you feeling? I asked.
Aoife feel better? Ethan safe?
Nah, it was just a... I started to explain to her that it was no big deal, but I doubted she would have understood. So she just beamed at me, and for the first time I saw no hesitance in her eyes, no caution in her face. She trusted me. She did not fear me. It was the first time I'd seen that in anyone other than Rox or Gaius. It had been so long, and it was from a Lithari child.
Diosium Ephraim,
she chirped. I blinked a moment, and once more felt my mind rush back to the battlefield. Diosem Ephraim. I'd been told those words before, but by someone else. It was a Lithari phrase, expressing gratitude to one they trusted. I felt a great weight upon my heart as she spoke them to me, and I embraced them. You're welcome, Aoife, I whispered. I reached to either side of her head and brushed her hair down once more to hide her ears. I touched her hair questioningly, and I stopped her. For now, we hide your ears.
Hide?
To cover up.
No see?
Exactly. She gave another cough, and I put my hand on her forehead. Her fever was all but gone, but I could tell she was still weak. Stay in bed, I instructed. She did as I told, and I walked to the door. I'll get you food.
Ethan,
she called. I stopped and looked back at her. She pointed at my sword, and I shook my head. I don't need it right now. I'll be right back.
Siderian?
Yes, I answered her. Her question was a simple one. She wanted to know if I was a warrior. My answer made her smile and lay back down again, satisfied. I wonder why she was glad at that. Did that make her feel more comfortable? I had so many questions about Lithari, but I had time to find out, time to learn about her. I wanted to know what it was that brought her here. Why were the Sarandinen after her? And could I really keep her secret from the town? Was this really the right choice? I needed answers, but I also needed food. I knew where to find one of those things. The others still eluded me. And that is where we'll end it for now, because I'm still in the process of editing and revising a lot of these chapters, and those are the ones that I have edited and revised. So you have heard Ethan Hawke's story so far. Now, I noticed a few of you guys asking about the differences between these pictures and this one. So to explain, I will. Initially, hold on, let me get this back up. There we go. So initially, these images right here were the ones that Jay drew originally for my original draft of the story. So this was originally what he drew. But when I started rewriting the story, he gave a redesign, which was this, which was a redesign for Ethan to make him look more like a sinister figure, because Ethan, during the war, had to do some dark things, and that's why he was branded a traitor. And you'll hear more about that as we go into it. I don't want to give away what he did because I want to get there naturally with you guys. Some of you guessed that he killed children. That's not quite true, but he did something traitorous, which has turned everyone against him. So you will find out more about that as we get further into it. I wonder what level of tech we have with these guns. I'm guessing single load musket types. Yes, essentially. Essentially, this is industrial revolution era technology. But that is what we're looking at here. But Tempest Blade is one of my favorite stories to work on. I've been having a lot of fun editing and fixing the chapters. Maybe next Monday we'll be able to do more. If y'all enjoyed it. But anyway, actually, funny enough, what really helped in this was I had to take a long break from writing Tempest Blade because I had a lot of creative dryness at the time. And what was funny is when I started playing the game Wuthering Waves with Hannah, I saw a trailer for a character named Chu Yuan who was basically just a blind version of Ethan Hawke. And when I saw the trailer, I was like, oh my God, it's just Ethan. It's legit just Ethan. And so actually, if y'all want, I'll let y'all decide. Would you like to see the trailer and I can kind of point out why he reminds me so much of Ethan? I will post that. I'll put that on a small poll right now and let y'all decide if y'all would like. I'm not going to force it, but I can certainly offer. Let me see. 1 second. We don't have to. We do not have to. It is not required, but I'm offering. Get through this because I hate these ads. I'll mute it. All right. Okay, so I pulled it up just in case it wins. So let's see if y'all have decided. 9 votes, and most of y'all said yes, you'd like to see it. All right, well, I'll pull it up. 1 second. Okay, that should do it. I'll turn on desktop audio so that you guys can hear it okay. All right. So we will watch this together just for fun, huh? It's only about 5 minutes, so this shouldn't take long. But I can kind of show you guys why this dude reminded me so much of Ethan and why it inspired me so much. All right, so y'all ready? I'm ready. Checking. Okay, we'll start. Oh, my fault. I made a slight error. 1 second. There we go. That should do it. So that was the first thing. That was the first thing that really jumped out at me, just them calling him a traitor. Because as I was watching the trailer and when he said, I was like, oh my gosh, because he's using a one-handed straight sword, a Xeon, like Ethan Hawke does, and he is called a traitor while killing apparently his own comrades, which, oops, spoilers. But then again, people who don't actually care have long since gone. I think it was right the first time. I can't hear it. Oh, you can't hear it? Okay, let's see. Let me see if I can fix it. Let me see if I can fix it. 1 second. Hey, mic audio. Let's try again. I need to just back up a little to see if it works. Oh, here's why. There we go. Alright, that should have fixed it. That should have fixed it. I'll rewind it a bit. Y'all let me know if it fixed it. That should have fixed it. Let me know if it did, because I want to make sure that that worked. But like I said, that bit about the traitor bit, that jumped out at me. But let's keep going.
You are?
Mother and father are dead because of people like you. You wear the same crest.
So that when she says you wear the same crest, that jumped out at me too, because that's a silver dragon head, and my first thought was, okay, Ethan didn't wear a crest like that, but he was a member of the Silver Corps, and the role of the Silver Corps during the war was to fight and kill the most dangerous enemies of the Empire. So kind of like her anger at recognizing his crest kind of fits as well. So thought that fit.
I do not know you.
Order up! Here are your noodles. And yours? Tongue down noodles. Extra spicy. That'll warm you up. Listen here.
Close one.
Sentinel, my table! Where'd you come from, you little rascal? Right, you come with me to the patrol station!
Get your hands off me! Arrest him! He's the bad one! Don't think this changes my mind about you.
Now, she's obviously not meant to be Aoife, but I thought it was funny that he's just kind of taken this girl under his wing without even meaning to, but just kind of has. I just think that's funny. Now, yes, in this, he's blind. Chi-Yuan in this is blind. Ethan in the story is not blind. That's the biggest difference between the two. Ethan is not blind. Chi-Yuan is. But yeah. So you'll see the rest in a minute.
Eat.
Again, there's the eat. Just attack the food. that was very much Aoife to me.
You need to stop following me.
I need to avenge my parents. I need to get stronger.
You wish to become stronger?
I'll stop following you, but only if you teach me how to fight.
Another, please.
Coming right up!
No spice!
No spice? What are you even eating noodles for? Who's the
Is it just me or is that dude the goose from Kung Fu Panda?
Take this!
Weak in the grip. Stiff in form.
I have you
You
now!
lack form. Too direct. Too easily read. All force, no subtlety. That's an extra hour before stance at dawn.
Yes, master.
I am not your master.
But I know you're a good man.
Good and evil.
Okay, so again, what I really like about this is him slowly building up this rapport with the girl. Now, Ethan with Aoife quickly grew to her while she had to learn to trust him. And here, he's slowly growing on her. It's kind of a reversal, but I still like it. So moving.
Cannot be.
Oh, you're confused who killed who. So here's basically the situation. Her parents were killed by members of the elite where he's from. He was one of the elite. She recognizes the crest on his thing, thinks that he's one of the people who killed her parents. She realizes he's not, but she wants him to teach her how to fight so that she can avenge her parents. So that's kind of what's going on. But anyway.
Discerned by eyes alone. In advance.
You're willing to help me.
Not foolish.
You're different from them.
His whole deed is unfair. Mingting lies.
Now this is the part that really made me think of Tempest Blade, because you're going to get a really cool fight scene, and it makes me think of the way Ethan would fight.
Just down the mountain. Do you still wish to carry on?
To avenge my parents, I have to become your equal.
Then you must defeat me.
To leave this mountain.
Begin.
Sprite Pierce. Save the vital. Reunite the falling star. Focus your strength. Follow their momentum. Make it your own. See past the obstacle. Find your opening. You've learned well.
So like I said, the fight scene is really, really sick. I love that. But the way they fight just screams at me that this is how Ethan would fight. This is how Ethan would engage his opponents. Very fluid, very much like those old martial arts shows or movies. That's kind of what inspired me with Ethan in the first place. So seeing this really jumped out at me. But in a second, we'll see like some wind moves, like some moves that involve wind and stuff like that, which screams at me Ethan Hawke. So here we go.
I'm in your debt for life. With this blade, I will honor your teachings. Your blade is ready. Do what your heart commands.
I won't stop until I find the one who did it. Thank you, Master.
Beneath endless mountains, all who have met must part. Walk a path boldly. Descend the mountain.
So like I said, just all of that just screamed Ethan Hawke to me. I was like, I immediately messaged Hannah and I was just like, Hannah, that's I found Ethan. And so what I did was, when I was talking to Jay about working on Tempest Blade again and kind of rewriting a little bit and editing it some, he asked, hey, do you want me to redraw Ethan? And I said, sure. Actually, to help you get inspired, here's the trailer. So I sent him the trailer. He said, that is sick. Can I borrow some of that? And that's kind of how we got this image here with the redesign of Ethan. And honestly, I think it's sick. But anyway, we'll stop there. Been going on plenty. Does Ethan have any relation to Tony? Tony Hawk? No, of course not. Anyway, most of the watchers have left by now, but thank you all for sticking with me. Those of you who stayed this long, you guys are the real fans. Appreciate you staying. Anyway, I'm going to head off. Tomorrow is Tuesday. I'm leading Bible study Tuesday night, so odds are good I will not be able to do a stream. If I do, it'll only be because I get home early enough. All right, so anyway, thank you all so much, and as always, I will see you in my next... there we go. I will see you in my next video. Take care, guys. Bye-bye.